Sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, neighbors, comrades, all citizens of the world, wherever you're going, wherever you've been. Welcome back, everybody. It's time for our first guest on Live from the Heartland for the week of October 5th. And this is someone who's no stranger to the show. He's been on talking about Rising Up Angry, a group that both he and I were involved with from 1969 to 75. He also has been on more recently talking about labor films. And it's always good to have a talk with my friend Peter Kuttner, who yesterday being on Monday of this week, stopped by my house, and he had just come back from Canada, and we got into talking about voting. We got into talking about how we got involved in the movement. So I thought, why not have Peter on just as having a good discussion? So good day to you, Peter Kuttner.
And good day to you, Brother Michael James.
So you were up in Canada. Why don't you just give us a little hint about what was going on up there and what triggered your thoughts about voting?
Well, my niece lives up there. She's the daughter of my brother who passed away about 10 years ago. And she's had two children since my brother passed. And I like to think of myself as I'm like, what is that, great uncle, grand uncle, but kind of the surrogate grandpa. So having great experience as a grandfather, I have I have a 30 and 24-year-old granddaughters, and expecting another in January, possibly on your birthday, Michael.
That would be the 16th. I turned 83.
That's about. Anyway, they mentioned, they being her husband, who's a Canadian, but votes in the United States. I don't quite know the various things of how that happens. She's not can't vote in Canada yet. But anyway, they were both decided they were voting for Jill Stein, a third-party candidate. And that got me thinking about all the times I had voted for third-party candidates. And in fact, when I met you or when we got to be friendly, was in 1968, which was my first presidential election. And even though I had grown up in a family of proud Democrats, not really to the left, but slightly off center to the left, in that they call themselves independents, and were often in fact, one of the first campaigns that I remember them being involved with was in 1955, when Daley the older, Daley the greater, maybe you'd call him, ran for mayor for the first time, and they were involved with other independent Democrats that backed the alderman from the 5th Ward, an economist from the University of Chicago. But you know what? Speaking of my brother, speaking of presidential elections, speaking of my parents, my mom's side of the family, actually my dad too. My dad grew up in Uptown, and my mom grew up in Rogers Park, and she lived in a big old apartment building on Pratt and Lakewood. Is that right? Yeah, Pratt and Lakewood. I think it's got a name for it, the Clarion or something like that. Anyway, they met at Senn High School. And that's what eventually brings me here. But her best friend, my mom's best friend in high school, was a woman who married a slightly older guy that she met, who'd gone through University of Illinois Law School and ran for Congress in are you guys the 7th? In the congressional district that Jan Schakowsky has now. And his name was Sidney Yates. Wow. He became pretty famous. There's a room in the cultural center, the old library named after him. And he was particularly good on the arts. He really stood up for the public arts and government money going towards the arts, which has helped a lot of us, particularly filmmakers, of which I am among. Anyway, they ran him for Congress in 1948. I was 5 years old, so this is a memory for me. My brother was 3. My mom and dad got to go to the inauguration, which television had just come in, but we didn't have one. And so my brother and I think my aunt was taking care of us. My mother and father went to Washington, and we were listening to it on the radio. And that's Harry Truman, who had been vice president under FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt died. Truman took over, dropped a couple of bombs, and then ran for president. So this is his first election. Anyway, I had you know how the microphone is placed in a way right in front of the president giving the speech, where you can kind of hear individuals behind him clapping. You can hear you can kind of make them out. You know, it's not the president clapping. But I had my brother, my 3.5-year-old brother, convinced that every time there was a clap, that was my mom or my dad. And he got really giggly about it and drooly and stuff. Anyway, that's my first memory of electoral stuff. And I'm only 5 years old. So
let's get back to why your niece is voting for Jill Stein and what that means and what your opinion is on that.
Well, I think they're foolish, one. However, their reasons for voting for Jill Stein, I don't think are foolish. They see the Democrats as a war party. There's 2 wars going on. Neither of them do my niece and her husband support, and they feel that they can't, in good conscience, vote for Kamala Harris. There's no way that they would vote for Donald Trump, and they're young enough to feel that they don't want to vote for someone that they don't want to vote for. And they're willing to, if the consequences are that Trump gets elected, actually they live in Canada, so it's no skin off them. But
I had my wife told me about she was just in New York and she met someone who was talking about if the orange-haired guy wins, they'll go back to France. And it seems to me more than ever, if that were to happen, we'd have to stick around to try to be part of the core that works to bring things back to at least a better position. And you had a story, you reminded me yesterday about someone we both knew, Stoughton Lind. He was a pretty famed academic and a radical guy. And he, what did he tell you, Peter?
Well, actually, it was in an apartment in Uptown, where not far from where my dad had grown up at some point. And you were involved with the Peace and Freedom Party.
Yeah, we were running Peggy Terry for vice president with Eldridge Cleaver.
All right. You want to first say what that was about?
Well, it was just for us, it was an attempt to move around the Midwest and even beyond and really recruit people to leave campuses and college and go to work with poor and working white people.
So who was Peggy Terry?
Peggy Terry was a welfare mother from Uptown who was part of the Joint Community Union.
And I think importantly, although I don't want to play the race card so early, she was white.
She certainly was. So she said she had been a racist, talked about picking cotton in Oklahoma. She ended up in Birmingham, I think, and she met a guy who she married, who later had a bookstore called The Guild here in Chicago. So she got real political and involved with the Congress of Racial Equality. But that was the only time I managed a vice presidential campaign for the United States.
I don't know. You kind of look a little like Tim Walz. Maybe you could be working you're kind of a coach, athlete guy. But no joke. I guess this was probably Eldridge Cleaver was the first black man long before Obama who ran for president. And interestingly, to us who were really, we didn't call it that then, but our organizing work was really anti-racist. What we were doing. So I think it's of note that a white woman and a black man were running that time. In any event, Stoughton Lynn, who was maybe more radical than me at the time, still said, look, you have to vote for a Democrat. And the reason that you do is, one, it gives people breathing time. It takes the less liberal party, it takes them off their backs. The Democrats are still coming out of the New Deal and have programs that help poor people, basically. And they could well go away, just like they could these days, if the Republicans are elected, and if we were to vote for Eldridge and Peggy Terry, we would be taking a vote away from a Democrat, and possibly they'd lose. As it was, they did lose. I don't think it had to do with our votes for Eldridge Cleaver. It had more to do with the terrible, immoral, racist war that they were waging. Cut to today, there is, in my opinion, and in the opinion of my two young relatives, a terrible racist war going on as well. And they can't, in good conscience, and they're concerned citizens, two young kids can't vote for Kamala Harris because of that. I just want to make it clear, I don't feel my politics have changed much, but I don't see there's no breathing room in that the dangers of having another Trump presidency override everything. And I told you yesterday, and I've said this on a number of elections, that I will hold my nose to vote for the Democrats, and I've done it so many times over the years. I think I've deviated my own septum.
Well, it's difficult to have
a joke, and you're supposed to react. Ha ha ha! You go.
There, it is a good joke. I still have that same position about you vote for the Democrats because it gives you more breathing room to bring things along. I mean, there was certainly back in '68, there was no way we were going to vote for Hubert Humphrey. And we didn't. And I'm not blaming us and the demonstrators in the streets. I blame more the Chicago police and the way they reacted for what happened and led Nixon to win that election. I think things are even more dire now than they were then. Not only do we have two wars going on, with the U.S. influence is less than it was. We have, the massive climate change that we're all experiencing these days. There are so many issues that while we want to protest from the street and push people, we also need to have people in a position who will listen to us. And that's one of the reasons I will vote for the Democrats. And I assume you will too.
Yes.
Your nose, Peter.
I will.
We have
I'll vote for the Democrats.
We have a couple of minutes left, and I'd love for you to share. You're a filmmaker. You're active in your union, IATSE, which is the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. They're like the stagehands in the movies. You and I were in the same movie set. I was playing a Nazi in The Package, one of Andy Davis's film with Gene Hackman. You were a cameraman on that. So you're an active union fellow. You also make movies, a number of them, a lot of shorts, and they're political. And you went to down south during some really important civil rights events. So I'd like you to take the next few minutes and tell people how you got involved, why you're still involved, and maybe a recommendation for younger people to get involved.
I don't know if I can do that in 2 minutes, but I can tell you that
You actually have 5.
Thank you. The first film that I made was at Northwestern, where I had started as a commuter student way back in the day. That'd be about 1960. I studied comparative literature. I didn't study film at all, but I got very interested in film and got tight with one of the people in the department. They allowed me to use the equipment. There was a symposium, I think they called it, going on that was going to talk about civil rights. And I made a little film. It's only about 8 minutes about a big white middle to upper middle class, even rich kids, university paying no attention to it. The civil rights movement, that is. And then Selma happened. I left school, Selma happened. I got a draft deferment, and I said, "Wait a minute! I'm one of the guilty parties in this movie that I made. What did I do? I hadn't done anything." So we went to Selma. Sort of, I have to criticize myself in that it was kind of an adventure to go down there. Frankly, we watched Bloody Sunday. We saw that on TV, but we didn't go down. And then we saw the next week where they tried, nothing happened. They didn't get across. We didn't go down. But when they safely got over the bridge, we said, "Oh, we should go down. We should go down." So we did, but it was, I'm being funny about it, but it was a life-changing experience. It was pretty remarkable. And it said to me, I needed to be involved in this movement of change. But at the time, I thought I could do it from within. And I got a job at Channel 11, which wasn't quite the public station that it is now. They call it educational TV. And I worked there for a couple of years. And I saw that because of the charity money that was coming in there, and it was all corporate stuff, that you could even do less at the so-called public TV than you could at commercial TV. And then kind of went back out to the fringes and ran into people who were making films about demonstrations that weren't being shown on TV. This is a group called the Newsreel. I met them in New York, and they said, "We got some friends who are going to have big demonstrations in Chicago." Well, I had been political and electoral, but I'll tell you, I was so glad to leave Chicago at the time. I don't even know if I knew the convention was going to be there. And I certainly didn't know anything about the demonstrations. And they talked me into coming back here, and we ended up starting to do exactly the same things that they were doing in New York. That's kind of the rest of the story. I have stayed the whole time on the fringes in terms of my political work and my documentary film work, but ended up in the mainstream because I was a worker in the industry. I wasn't always the filmmaker. I was a mid-level camera technician. That was my stagehand work. And I needed that because I needed insurance. We both had children around the same time. I didn't have any insurance, and the union really helped for that. And the reason that I can talk to you at 11 o'clock in the morning is because now that I don't work anymore, I have a union pension, and that helps me to not have to go to work.
Long live the unions.
Yeah. If I can do one more quick thing, is that although I have not been in the workplace for 8 or 9 years, almost 10 years, I'm still very active in the union, because what is happening in the union is that a radical caucus, well, not so radical, a reform caucus has formed within the IATSE, which is 150,000 Canadian and American workers. And it's based on what the Teamsters did, what the auto workers did more recently, and the CTU, the Chicago Teachers Union, all formed radical caucuses, reform caucuses within their larger union and eventually took over leadership. And that's what we see happening with the IATSE.
Well, Peter, it's good talking to you. I wish we had a little more room, but as you know, you're welcome back anytime, and I will be seeing you in the next few days.